Hello and welcome to the Local Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Johnson. The Local Leaders Podcast provides a platform for successful business owners to share their stories, their experiences, their advice, and their ideas in order to help our listeners achieve more success in their business and in their lives. Get ready, another great show is coming up. Good afternoon. This is Jeff Johnson, your host of the Local Leaders Podcast, and we are thrilled today to have with us Jonathon Shivick. Jonathan, did I get that? Did I get your name right?
No, you did. Yeah, actually, a lot of people get it wrong.
Yeah, well, I meant to ask you ahead of time, and I've just been calling you Jonathan, and hadn't had to pronounce the last name before. But Jonathan's with the Portly Pig, and we are thrilled to have him on today and to have an opportunity to learn about his business and kind of where he got started, and welcome. Thank you for being here, sir.
Yeah, not a problem. Glad I could be here.
Great. Well, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of give the audience an overview of the business and kind of how you got started and where it's at and all that kind of good stuff, and what's special about it.
Yeah. So the short answer is we're a barbecue restaurant. We're located in Hartford, Connecticut. And we're inside of the Parkville Market Food Hall, actually, which is Connecticut's first food hall, first venture of its kind anywhere in the state, which is kind of cool. We've been in business since 2018. We started out doing catering only, and originally had intended to have a food truck. But this opportunity came up, and it was an awesome opportunity for us, and so we took advantage of it and pushed off any other ideas until a little bit later. But our big claim to fame for us is we're pioneering New England style barbecue. So for those of you listening from the various southern parts of the country, I know it sounds blasphemous, but I'll tell you now, I'm the only person in the world ballsy enough to put New England style barbecue on the side of my restaurant. So we're starting something, making friends and influencing people.
That's right.
And it gives us the freedom to do what we want with the food. Barbecue is a fantastic time-honored cooking tradition, and it's big all over the South, and everybody has their own unique regional styles. And the issue for us trying to figure out how to do all of this and how to differentiate ourselves and be different, stand out, and still be able to be us and put our own spin on things without getting yelled at for violating any of the sacred barbecue covenants was to start a whole new style. And New England doesn't have its own barbecue. It has a lot of other stuff going for it. It has clam bakes, lobster boils, and pot roasts and all that. But, we figured what would we do different? And we started working on that and started building from there. And New England barbecue was born. It's a mishmash of different regional styles. We pick and choose the parts we like and combine it with local flavors and a little bit of international fusion and kind of take it to the natural progression of the next step, really. I mean, that's how it started and that's where it's going.
Well, that's fantastic opening. I appreciate you sharing that. And that's a pretty big move from you, thinking that, and not just thinking, but actually pulling off the fact that you're creating your own New England style barbecue. You're creating not just a brand, but a whole culture, because people really get into their barbecue, as we know. Over here in the South, it's got a little different flavor to it probably than up your way. But that's an amazing goal to take on. And one of the things I wanted to make sure we talked about today too, in addition to bringing out a whole new New England style recipe, is that you guys are really unique in that you are located inside a food hall. And when we talked before, you're actually one of the first company that we've had on here who's been inside a food hall. Not that food halls are uncommon, but you were the first tenant to the food hall, and being in that situation creates some unique opportunities, but also some unique challenges. So I wondered if you would just kind of tell that story a little bit about, how you decided to get into the food hall and the challenges that it brought you. And maybe after that, we'll talk a little bit about things to look for for others who are maybe thinking of starting up in the same way. That was a big mouthful, but tell us about the food hall.
So for us, it's I'll tell you the whole story. It starts with us working on our catering. You know, we were part of a shared use commissary kitchen that's right around the corner from Parkville Market, actually, where we're located now. And it was a commissary kitchen that was a not-for-profit. It was run by Hands on Hartford LLC. And they do a lot of community outreach, and they do a lot of low-income housing and free clinics and food banks and stuff like that. And as part of their operation, they have an incubator for local businesses in the area. They have the commissary location that people can use to start their own businesses and use that as a shared use kitchen that they wouldn't otherwise be able to. And they also have these meetings. So the first Monday of every month is the Parkville neighborhood business meeting. And me and my business partner went there. And, she was particularly interested because the primary focus of the meeting was women-owned small businesses in Hartford and in the area, which is a great thing, and that's why I went as well. But the first presenter was a woman from Parkville Market, one of the management team, who had these pamphlets and these little papers to hand out, and she talked for about 5 minutes, and then she had to go. She had another meeting to get to. But for the whole rest of the night, I'm flipping through this pamphlet, and my head's already going. And I'm like, this is a really good idea. Like, this is a really good idea. And they've got these little diagrams of the stall spaces and the ideas, the artist renderings and all that. And that's what I did for the rest of that hour-long meeting. Everybody else was talking and doing stuff, and I'm ashamed to admit that I ignored 90% of it because I had this in my head.
Yeah, your head was spinning with all kinds of ideas.
Exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm.
So we went and we convinced the rest of the partners. There were 5 of us at the time, all together. And then we sent out an application to them. And here's the first thing that you have to know about going into a food hall. It's hard enough to find a spot to build a restaurant these days. With a food hall, you have a management team and an owner and a landlord you have to impress. And you have to, impress upon them that your food is going to fit into their product mix and that you're going to be profitable, not only for yourself, but for them, because we all rely on all the various businesses in the food hall to bring people in. Right. So if there's businesses that aren't attractive or don't fit the mix or don't fit in well, then it's a detriment to all of us. So we set up a tasting with the owner of the project, a man named Carlos Mata. He's a local real estate investor, and his daughter and their management team who were running the place. And we did a tasting. And actually, it was funny. I was down in North Carolina, and they moved the tasting on us by 3 days. So I had to fly home early. I was visiting a friend of mine, and you do what you have to do. But we impressed them. They loved the food. So the rest was history. But I think the biggest problem for us in the early days was just the waiting, because we passed quite a few deadlines that they had set where we were going to be open, and then we were going to be completely done and ready to open. And the food hall kept on getting delayed because it was going into a building that was built in the late 1800s that hadn't been updated. And as is wont to happen in situations like this, especially in old cities like Hartford, every time they went to go and do something, they found something else wrong. Yeah. So they had to reinforce the foundation. Then they had to replace the foundation. Then they had to put in extra supports because the building couldn't support a second level because it was a tall building, but it was built as a rail warehouse. Then they had to do all sorts of different stuff. So we were pushed back, and then finally, we opened in May of last year in the middle of COVID-19, the middle of the lockdowns, just starting to come out. And I mean, that right there was the biggest challenge. We were not full. We didn't have every tenant in there. We only had 6 restaurants when we first opened. So it was a tough sell to get people out there, especially in the middle of COVID. There was no guarantee that anybody was going to last or succeed, but so far we've been doing all right. We have a lot more interest now, a lot more foot traffic. We're getting to be more well-known, but some of the unique challenges of getting started in there if I had to say, were definitely making sure that you worked well with the management team. It's something that a lot of people don't think about when they open their own business.
Yep.
You think you're the boss now, and you are, it's true, but there's still going to be some situations where you got somebody else to answer to who's holding your lease. And with a food hall, it puts you in a unique position because you're under contract to them and it's your business. But at the end of the day, you have to be open the hours they want you to be open. You have to be open the days they want you to be open. You have to follow their rules and regulations. You have to make sure that you okay any of your menu changes or products through them because they want to make sure that they maintain a good product mix throughout the entire place and that nobody is directly competing with one another where they can avoid it. So, those are a few of the things that you have to be understanding of if this is something that you're going to do specifically in a food hall.
Yeah. And those are some good points because for a restaurateur, your menu, your food items, what you're going to present to the public that's what it's all about, right? Besides the experience you're delivering, and for chef owners and owner operators who are also cooks and the chef as well, then that's even more challenging to think, oh, wait a minute, I can't just add that. I've got to go ask somebody.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And they normally say yes, they really do,
right.
But you still have to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like being in a homeowners association and you want to put up a fence, right? You got to get permission or paint your house. You got to ask before you do it. So
you own the house, but you don't own the rights to change the house.
Right. Which is a unique perspective. Now that's kind of the downside of it. So what are the upsides you think of the food hall situation?
So, in terms of advantages, there's a lot of interesting advantages. And we've only been in there for a little over a year now, being that we opened last May. It's now just became August.
Yep.
Whenever anyone's listening to this is when we recorded it. We're still kind of learning where those advantages lie. I'll tell you right off the bat, the fact that you have so much pull in one area. We have 19 restaurants in this one little building, and it's a detriment the same way that it's an advantage in certain ways. So, it gets a lot of interest. You get a lot of people who come in who may not have gone to another place because there's so many opportunities for different kinds of food. Everybody can get something that they want. They can try things from different places, but it's also a disadvantage because it really depends on the day and on the demographic as to whether or not certain restaurants are going to do well. And barbecue, particularly for us in our situation, and this is something that I would definitely impress upon anybody thinking about going into a food hall to wonder about. Barbecue is an expensive cuisine. The meat's expensive, especially now with COVID. It takes a lot of time and effort to prep the things and make them, and you got to smoke them for a long time overnight. The shortest things on our menu are our chickens. They smoke for 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of work that goes into it, and you have to charge more because of it. And in our instance, we have a lot of great reviews. We have a lot of people who love our food. We have a lot of repeat customers, but because we're in a food hall, we don't get as much business as we would like or as we could be getting if we were outside on our own. Because we don't necessarily attract a larger proportion of the people who come into the food hall because they may want to go intrinsically for the cheaper options, for the burritos and tacos, nachos, sandwiches, things like that. And that may be what they're looking for. And those people at the end of the day are taking up guest space for all of the restaurants in the food hall. So for the rest of the places who aren't getting really, really busy selling the cheaper options or selling the things that people want that day, it makes it harder for customers who want you to get in there, especially if it's busy and the parking lot is full. It's tough because that parking lot may be full for 1 or 2 restaurants. Like there might be a line of people waiting at Mofongo, let's say, which is one of the restaurants that we have up here. That's Puerto Rican American, very good place, but they do rice bowls and mofongos and things like that. So let's say that, they have 2,000 people a day that come in just to see them. And they don't, I'm just using a number. Then that means that's 2,000 less people, 2,000 less spaces, 2,000 less people walking in the door who would necessarily come to any of the other restaurants. So it's a unique challenge balancing guest counts and market share in a place like this. And that's one of the things that the market management team has to help us with. They're still learning too. Like they've never really done this before, most of them. They come from various backgrounds, working in corporate food service, or I think our general manager was a Dunkin' Donuts regional manager for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to them to, lean on and heavily advertise the less trafficked restaurants. It's up to them to figure out an advertising strategy and an exposure strategy that makes it fair and equitable for everybody. Because at the end of the day, if you have, 3 restaurants that are doing really, really well out of 19, and a lot of people are coming just for those 3 restaurants, but the other 17 restaurants or 16 restaurants are doing okay, it's up to you to make sure that you can spread that market share around as much as it is up to those individual places.
Yeah, well, otherwise, you run the risk of losing the 16 others.
Exactly.
If they're not doing the business they need to do to keep the doors open, and then the food hall becomes a 3-restaurant hall, which is not as enticing to the general public as the overall advantage of coming to the food hall to begin with. So yeah, a lot of things to think about in addition to the normal things when you're opening up a restaurant. You've got some extra things to throw in there.
Oh, you do indeed.
Yeah. Now from I thought it was interesting on the kitchen layouts. Didn't you tell me there was a 200 square foot and a 400 square foot option?
Yep. So that's how they lay the kitchens out for us. There are, I want to say there's 13 200 square foot stalls, and then there's 6 400 square foot stalls. And of course, they've decided now after the fact that the 400 square foots have higher sales minimums than the 200 square foots. Which is again something you need to be aware of, because that could come into play, and that's something you need to worry about doing. Otherwise, you have a problem with your contract and things like that. That's unique to a food hall.
Yeah.
Not saying all food halls are going to have that, but a lot of them do. So the 200 square foot kitchens are, or at least were intended to be completely built out by the market. So they basically stock the kitchens with standard equipment. They'd have a standard layout of equipment that would be in there, and then if a restaurant came in, a restaurant could buy and put in their own piece of equipment if they wanted to that was specialty, or they could just use all the standard equipment that was in there. And there would be, the basic stuff. There would be storage racks, there would be sinks, there would be an oven, range, a little broiler grill, a flat top, a fridge, and a freezer. And then if you wanted to change anything, then you'd have to buy your own stuff. And the 400 square foots were intended to be longer leases, because you would come in and buy all of your own equipment, and equip the space, and then that would go with you when you left. And that's why you would have a 3-year lease, and the 100 and the 200 square foot spaces would have a 1-year lease. And in practice, it didn't wind up working out quite as well as that. In order to get people into the 400 square foot spaces, they did have to start buying some equipment and doing that and changing the way that they were going to work. So we, as far as I know, we're one of the only kitchens. I think there's one other place that bought all of their own equipment and put it in. Not that I'm complaining, because it's good for me if ever we leave and go anyplace else. Now I have all my stuff. I can just take it, move it, bring it someplace else.
Right.
But what they've wound up doing, which is good, which I think is good, is they've wound up equipping at least, if not all the equipment in a space, at least most of it for most of the other restaurants. Gotcha. Which makes it a lot more approachable, and a lot more easy to enter into getting into business, which is what they wanted. They wanted to make it easier for people who are young, up and coming potential restaurateurs or chefs who have great ideas, who may not have $200,000 or $300,000 worth of capital to open a traditional restaurant, to be able to come in, try out their idea, and see if it would work, make some money, and do that with a minimum of financial risk to themselves.
Yeah, which is ideal, and it's essentially an incubator of, even though it's a food hall incubator as opposed to just a food hall. So that's fantastic. And I think you said there were 19 in there. Is that full capacity or almost full?
So the 19 vendors that we have in there now is full capacity for the restaurants, and I think 2 just left. Their contracts were up, and we're waiting on new places to come in. So we might only have 17, not right this second. But Parkville Market particularly has something that some food halls don't have, and that's the fact that we intend eventually, hasn't happened yet because of COVID, everything got pushed back, to have I think it's 17 retail vendors on the upper floor. So right now they're just empty spaces that are being used as socially distanced dining rooms, which is a far better use for them at the moment.
Yeah.
But eventually there's going to be retail spaces upstairs. So things like chocolatiers, maybe a florist, maybe a barber shop, maybe a spice guy selling all sorts of rubs and spices and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's open to other cooking stalls that don't require hoods as well. So a place like maybe like a little donut shop or
Coffee shop,
something
yeah.
like that.
Mhm.
We had a lady come in just the last weekend who did gourmet Belgian waffles, and she's thinking about moving in upstairs and doing waffles and coffee.
Yep.
So there's a lot of other opportunities there, and that would bring a lot more customers in, a lot more draw.
Yep.
But at the same time, I think one of the reasons, and I don't know for sure, but I think one of the reasons that they've held off on getting people up there for now is because, quite frankly, we just don't have enough parking.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that you really have to be aware of, is if you're moving into any sort of shared location, you have to ask all the questions and be annoying. And I didn't realize this. I didn't even think about this. Be annoying. Figure out how much parking there is. Figure out if it matches the numbers that they're telling you, because our projections were based on a certain amount of people coming through the food hall every day. And obviously with COVID, that's not going to happen. But with the size of the parking lot, it was never going to happen.
Yeah.
We know that now.
Yeah.
And they're working on expanding it. But at the time, there just wasn't enough parking spaces to filter that many people through the place.
Yeah, it makes it difficult to hit those objectives when you can't get enough people in there to actually meet those forecasts when you started out. But that's a great lesson to learn, and I think actually everything you've said is great information for those who haven't thought of doing it, checking into food halls, because there's food halls all over the country.
They're the next big thing.
Yeah, it's a great way to go. With real estate being what it is today, less upfront capital to get involved in most cases. Depending on how they're set up and how they're structured, but the opportunity to get in is a little easier. I think that's the common idea around the country, and you've got a lot of people to work with and draw off of, and gather advice and get good ideas from as well. So. Just like our listeners here on the podcast are looking for ideas, that helps the less experienced entrepreneurs as well. So I'd encourage our audience to look into that. Now, you're also in the catering business, so you've got catering on the side as well. You're able to handle that volume in your kitchen in the food hall?
Shockingly, yes. I surprise myself every day.
Yeah.
But we have handled, we've had a couple of parties that I wish I had more space for, but yeah, we handle restaurant operations and all of our catering out of the same 400 square foot kitchen currently.
Yeah.
And we've actually got a deal. It's a pretty good deal worked out with the market, is if we don't use the space that we're in, at all for a party, like if we go back and use our old commissary location at Hands on Hartford, which we haven't had to do yet, but we're getting close with a couple of these parties, especially the ones I got coming up. then as long as we don't use any of the space in the market, we don't have to pay a percentage of sales to them. That's how our rent is structured. That's how most people's rent would be structured at a food hall. Is you pay a certain percentage of whatever your sales are per month to the market as rent, and then in return you get you get heat, hot water, everything is included in that.
Right.
Which is cool, which it may be a little bit more expensive than industry standard for occupancy costs, but you don't have to worry about extra stuff coming up. It's whatever's in your rent is there, and that's it, it's covered.
Yeah.
So for us, if we do a party that doesn't use the market space at all, we don't have to include that in our sales for the month, and we don't have to pay them their 12% on it, which is kind of cool. So it's definitely a challenge, and actually one of the reasons we're looking for a second location is to use as a catering base, so we don't have to do it out of the 400 square foot kitchen.
Right. Yeah, that would be nice. And as you said, you only got started back in May of 2020, so you're still kind of on the new side, and and you had to do it through COVID. So that in itself is a whole nother story about how you were able to not only launch, but survive and thrive during COVID. And I'm sure it's a testament to the whole concept, and everybody involved in the business and the food hall coming together to pull it off and make it work. But were there any lessons learned from the COVID side that kind of changed the way you did business or do business?
Well, so like every other restaurant around the country, I think it's safe to say every other restaurant now, we do a lot more of our business in takeout and in delivery dining.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the way the industry was trending anyway. If you look at the last 5 or 6 years, COVID just really accelerated that. So we always figured we would do a lot of takeout dining. But what wound up happening was we went a little bit above projections. I'd say about 70% of the food that we sell is food that's either taken out of the market to be consumed elsewhere, or is delivered on an average week. Maybe a little bit less, a little bit more, depending on the week. But that's the biggest thing that we had to change. Is being able to market and appeal to customers who aren't going to be able to see your food on a plate. And traditionally for a barbecue place, that's a big thing, because people come in and they get these trays of meat and they sit down at their tables, and that's half of your advertising right there. That's people who are waiting in line, looking at those trays of food going, oh my God, I want that. And then you're upselling without even necessarily trying to upsell.
Right.
So we have to pack everything up in boxes. We have to pack everything up in bags. People want everything sealed. People are even more, concerned now about people having taken the wrong food or gotten the wrong thing. If that bag has been touched by somebody else, a lot of times people don't want it. So you got to make sure you're on top of that. It always was that way, but it's way worse now with COVID.
Yeah.
People are very, very paranoid.
Yeah, the germaphobes came out because I've seen that firsthand. Yeah.
Yep. Other than that, though, I mean, there was a lot of money that we had to spend on infrastructure upgrades that we weren't expecting to.
Right.
And the golden rule of restaurants is that you're in the red for the first 2 years of operation, and that's why you need to make sure that you're properly capitalized. Because you can't expect to realistically start reliably turning a profit for the first 24 months of operation. COVID has really made that, even more stark. And there was a grant we were able to qualify for, but we're in a unique position too, because we were such a new business before the pandemic started that we snuck into the crack. There's one big crack in all of the COVID, and for restaurants who are out there who are in the same situation, I'm sure there are a lot. I'm sure there's people who are listening who can relate. All of the federal programs and a lot of the state programs required that you show a business income loss between 2019 and 2020 in order to even qualify for those programs. And they were all automated, where an underwriter would review them if you were selected, but there was nobody you could go in and sit down and talk to. So for us, we qualified for one grant that was a local grant from the state of Connecticut, and we couldn't qualify for anything else. because we were technically in business in 2019, but we didn't have an income loss because we were basically doing our catering as a side gig while we worked our day jobs waiting for the market to open.
Yeah.
So we're in a unique position where, we had to spend all the same money everybody else did, but we didn't qualify for PPP. We didn't qualify for disaster assistance. We didn't qualify for bridge loans. We didn't qualify for any of the SBA programs because every single one of them had that business income loss requirement.
Yeah.
So that was a unique challenge for us. It was really, really frustrating watching other places qualify for those loans and we didn't get anything.
Yeah. Watching those loan reserves just start dropping, and it didn't take long for it, especially that first one that came out, for that to get to dry up and get utilized. And of course, second round they made some changes and cut out some of the larger companies who were taking big whacks, at the funds. But yeah, that's a frustrating experience for you, I'm sure. And I hate you guys had to go through that. I hate the whole country had to go through what we've gone through and are continuing to go through as things drag on, despite the fact that we've got the shot and all that good stuff. But we won't get into the politics of that at the moment. That would be another podcast that we'd have to start to be able to dig into all that. And speaking of which, one of the big challenges a lot of our guests have shared, really, restaurant owners across the country, is staffing. The inability to find enough help to properly operate at full service levels to deliver the experience you're trying to deliver and be open the operating hours that you want to be open. Has that impacted you guys or other people there at the food hall as much?
Oh, absolutely. So now us being a small restaurant, 400 square foot kitchen and a food hall, we don't need a lot of staff. We would like to have about 7 people on staff, including my owners. We got 5. But I have seen other restaurants have big issues with staffing.
Yeah.
A lot of people, for one reason or another, and I get the distinct impression that as far as restaurants go particularly, it's a lot of people who are waiting to get back jobs that they had before the pandemic, and those jobs may just not be coming back for them. Or it's a lot of people who've decided that they want to switch careers, use this as an opportunity to do something else because restaurant work is very stressful. It's particularly hard work. It's particularly fast paced. It's one of the most high stress industries. Anybody who's worked here for any amount of time can agree with that.
Yes.
So I feel like a lot of people are just trying to get out and do something different, and then maybe they'll use restaurants as a fallback. But all of that combined has really made it difficult to find staff. And I've been trying to hire 2 part-time people for the last 6 months, and I put up help wanted signs. I went ahead and went on Indeed. I did Craigslist. I did ZipRecruiter. I did a few other websites, and I paid about $500, $600 to get those ads up there. And I got 6 applications in the week that they were running, which is ridiculous. Which actually, it's funny. I got a discount when I called ZipRecruiter, and I'm like, guys, this isn't great. And the guy looks at it and goes, oh no, you're supposed to get way more applications than that. Like, even he was surprised.
Yeah. So
he actually offered me like a 30% discount. He's like, we're sorry the service didn't return the results you expected. Here, have this back.
Yeah. I've heard similar stories, and some people got more resumes back or got more of a response, but then in following up on those resumes, they couldn't get anybody in the door that actually really wanted to work.
I interviewed one person who was real promising, and he just never showed up for his trial shift.
Story of our lives in the restaurant world, right?
It's true.
Yeah, it's tough out there. Well, that's some great insight, and it kind of leads me to another area, and I'm not even sure if we talked. Well, I know we did talk a little bit about sales and numbers and things like that when we were talking before, and I don't want to get into necessarily that piece of it here, but just in general, when you're thinking of the health of your business and you're taking a look at it, day to day or week to week, what are you looking at specifically? I mean, are you looking at just sales? Are you looking at the all the numbers and percentages and food cost percentages and labor percentage. What is it that kind of makes you tick or that you watch very closely?
So for us, we have that unique advantage of knowing 100% that a certain percentage of our sales are going out the door for rent, and that's fixed. And that's not always the case for a lot of restaurants. A lot of restaurants have unexpected bills that come up, and electricity and gas can be higher or lower. So, our percentage is a little more than we'd like, but it includes everything, and we can count on it. It is 100% going to be that every single month. So that's good for us, at least to budget around.
Right.
But we do definitely keep an eye on our labor costs and on our food costs, and I keep an eye on the percents. We do inventory at the end of the month, and I know roughly what my weekly budget is for food and supplies, for paper goods and all that. So I just during the month, before we do end of month inventory and get an actual idea, I just keep it in my head that I want to be around a certain amount of money. And when I start getting up to that, then I start thinking about what I really need, what can wait until next week. Just that way you stop yourself from over purchasing, get a little bit of cash discipline, I call it.
Yeah.
And then labor costs for us, we need to hit a certain percentage in order to be where we want to be. So we keep an eye on that every week when I run payroll. I do the numbers, I do the payroll myself. Part of the beauty of having a small staff, we use QuickBooks. So I'm putting in all the hours, I'm putting in all the tips, I'm putting in all the shares, and I get to see the breakdown and the pie graph every single week. So I do the math and I figure out, this is how much we did in sales, this is how much we paid out in labor, and that way I can adjust our scheduling week to week to try and fine tune those numbers. Because at the end of the month for us, especially with food being the way it is now, meat being so expensive, and us being a barbecue restaurant, I mean, I can't really raise my prices a whole lot because of the area that we're in and the demographic that comes into the market. So I have to just kind of suck up and eat the extra cost. So on a good month right now, we run between a 3 and 5% profit. And anything that disrupts that means that we're either breaking even or losing money. So we need to keep an eye on those costs. Absolutely.
Yeah, not a lot of wiggle room in there, is there?
There's not right now. No, and I mean, restaurant margins are historically razor thin.
Yep.
If you do everything right, 100% of the time, the textbook says you can expect to make between 15 to 20 cents off of every dollar. And that's if you have your restaurant running like a well-oiled machine, and that is usually not the norm.
Yeah, exactly. Well, those are great insights, and it just always intrigues me as to to what people are looking at and kind of how they measure success within their own facility or own restaurant. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm hoping that those food prices, especially meat prices, come down. And maybe
no, you need both.
Yeah,
that right there, honestly, that's an extra $700 a week.
Yep.
That I'm spending on the same orders I was buying 6 months ago. The only thing that's changed is all the prices have shot through the roof.
Yep. Yeah, just like lumber, right? Can't afford to build a house now. You can't afford to cook a barbecue unless you really.
No, it's true. It's expensive.
Yeah, and I can see how in the situation you're in the food hall, you don't have your price elasticity is very lean because you're already at or above the average cost within the food hall probably. It's great advice, and for anybody that's thinking of starting up their restaurant now, there's so many things you got to look at, not just a restaurant but any business, and cost of goods, cost of food, labor, staffing, all these things are
insurance. I mean, everything that people don't necessarily think about. There's a lot of hidden costs.
Yeah, ton of hidden costs, ton of things you just don't think about until you get down in the weeds and start trying to do it. Restaurants, you've got permitting and licensing and zoning issues in some cases, and there's just a plethora of things that can come up. So we encourage you to do your homework before you start investing that capital in a new business. So Jonathan, any, I'm coming up on about 45 minutes, so I'm going to start to wrap it up. Any last words of wisdom or advice or anything else that you want to share?
So I'll tell you now. You can there's a couple pieces of advice that I wish people had given me, and there's a few things that I had always kind of known in the back of my head that I didn't realize how important they were until I actually started to do this. The biggest thing I can say is, and it's easier said than done, obviously, is make sure you have enough capital. Make sure you find investors, make sure you have enough of your own money to invest. Um, you know, what they say is what they say is true. You need a certain amount of money for your first couple of years in business because there's going to be things that happen, things that come up. There's going to be different equipment you need to buy. There's going to be bills you need to pay that you weren't planning on. And you could have 3 super profitable months in a row, and then all of a sudden you got to spend 20 grand, and there's all that profit. You're right back down to nothing.
Yeah.
So definitely make sure that you're prepared for that. That's what kills a lot of restaurants. A lot of restaurants, spend all their money up front in designing and building a place and buying their first couple weeks worth of food. And then when people don't come in or when anything happens, it derails their entire business, and then they close. They close in a couple of months because they can't make enough money.
Yeah.
Don't expect to make a profit for the first couple of years. At the end of the year, you're going to be declaring a loss, and that's normal. That means you're doing something right, actually, to be honest with you, because the idea is that for that first couple of years, you're changing things. You're buying new equipment that you need that you didn't realize you needed. You're staffing, and you're figuring out where everything fits and everything sits. And you're getting into your product, and you're doing your sales and spending money on advertising and getting guests through the door. And that's the stuff you should be spending your money on. Other than that, I'll say this. It seems really daunting to open any sort of business, but especially a restaurant. And there's days where it is. There's a lot of work to go into doing it. There's permitting and constant meetings with the zoning commission and city planning and water and sewer and electrical, and there's food. There's credit checks for every single account that you open with every single food purveyor. There's delivery costs, and there's equipment leasing and financing and equipment repairs, and there's all of this stuff. And it's hectic. There's a lot of stuff, but I'll tell you this, don't let it overwhelm you. If it's something you want to do, go for it. If it's something you want to get done, and if it's something you've been wanting to do for a long time, it is extremely doable. It's a lot of work. You got to work through it. It helps if you have help. I have a couple of business partners who help me out handle a few things. But just keep on going, and before you know it, you're in the middle of it working on the downslope. Right. And you're looking back at all the stuff you already did. So you just gotta buckle down and get through it. Do a lot of research. Find a local mentor if you can. Talk to somebody who's done this before.
Good advice.
Because they'll give you a lot of good pieces of advice.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. There's a lot of free mentorship resources out there at the SBDCs and all your local governmental entities. SCORE, which is one that's around the country that can help you out, or just seeking out people like Jonathan who have done it and just ask a few questions, because most owners that especially our guests here are always willing to share their thoughts.
Absolutely.
As long as you don't ask during lunchtime. Lunch or dinner service, don't ask questions. But outside of that, our guests are awesome and have been a world of help. And Jonathan, the information you provided, I think, has been amazing. And I appreciate you taking time to be on our show today to share with our audience your knowledge and your experience. Not only just in the food industry, but in your particular, in a couple of particular areas that we haven't talked about before, which is, the food hall concept and things to look for and look out for and be aware of before you get into those pros and cons, et cetera. I would love to have maybe a follow-up down the road. Maybe next year we could see where you are and kind of see how that growth has occurred. And we wish you the best. And anyway, thank you so much for being on today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad I could be here. Glad I could help out.
Well, and ladies and gentlemen, we've got Jonathon Shivick here with the Portly Pig. And we hope that if you have not had the opportunity to visit and have their barbecue, you need to get down there and get some of that barbecue, New England style barbecue, that is, invented right here, the Portly Pig. Get down there and try it out and share some time with Jonathan and his team. We wish you the best and hope that you achieve everything that you're after. And again, we appreciate you being on our show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. And everybody else, again, this is Jeff Johnson. I'm your host of Local Leaders Podcast. We appreciate you tuning in today and hope that you will come back tomorrow. Thank you so much.